Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is politics done right.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willies, your host. Thank you so kindly for being a part of the show. We are going to have a great show today because we have yet again another great guest, and you have definitely heard about this guy, this journalist, this investigative journalist, this author, because you know what? He made a ruckus and Donald Trump was quite a bit upset with him. You see, you have to remember he knew Donald Trump way yonder. Not only that, in more form. So the title of the show today, author and investigative journalist Jonathan Greenberg had the goods on Trump before most. Subtitle of the show, Jonathan Greenberg had the original tapes of Trump calling under a pseudonym to inflate his net worth. He understands the thug-in-chief better than most, and his Washington Post and HuffPost exposés are probative. So, today we have author and investigative journalist Jonathan Greenberg. He's a good friend of mine that goes back several years. Jonathan has the definitive tapes of a conniving Trump that he made into a long and detailed expose titled Trump Lied to Me About His Wealth to get onto the Forbes 400. And here are the tapes. At the Washington Post, he wrote that long article for the Washington Post. He followed that up with the article titled The 6 Essential Cons That Define Trump's Success, that everyone should read, folks. Everyone should read that article. Jonathan has been featured on CNN's New Day show with Chris Cuomo, on MSNBC The Beat with Ari Melber, and had his story featured on The Daily Show. He recently released his new novel, America 2034, Utopia Rising. You know, I started to wonder when I saw him. I'll have to ask him that when we get him on screen. My new book is called How to Make America Utopia. Hey, guy, you took Utopia away from me, man. Anyhow, so who is Jonathan Greenberg? He is an award-winning national investigative journalist, editor, author, and new media innovator committed to creating a better world by informing to empower, which is the name of the public interest nonprofit media publisher that he founded in 2015 to publish the Sonoma Independent and the Maui Independent news websites. Jonathan was a Web 1.0 pioneer, founding Gist Communications in 1996, an internet company that competed successfully with TV Guide Online in 1997. Gist was one of just 14 websites in the world to be named a winner of the first annual Webby Awards in San Francisco. So before any further ado, I bring you Jonathan Greenberg. How are you doing, Jonathan? How you doing, my friend? I haven't seen you in a long time.
It's great, Egberto. It's fun to be on your show and on the video format too. It's great.
Listen, man, it's great. I mean, I saw it was funny because I was sitting down in the living room, right, and I saw this guy pop up on the screen and talking about these tapes from Donald Trump and all of that, and I got up. I looked at my wife and I said, "That's Jonathan. I know Jonathan. He never told me he was a buddy of Donald Trump or anything like that. Tell me a little bit about that story, man."
Well, I when I was out of college, I started working at Forbes as a researcher, fact checker, and after a year there, they had this new project, the Forbes 400, and they wanted a researcher who really was like into digging to be the head of research for it. So it was a 13-month project. I was tapped to create it with Malcolm Forbes. And then they added a lot of other people on the, onto the staff. It became the biggest project that Forbes did, and remains so to this day. But for 3 years, I managed the research, and I especially managed the real estate for it. So I had some contacts through my family in real estate, and I talked to people, and I was sort of the young guy who went out and talked to them about how much each of them was worth and how much the other guys were worth. So I met Donald Trump for the first time in reference to that in June of 1982, and I had no idea that he would see this as his opportunity to con his way into the major league and to borrow billions of dollars for banks from Las Vegas. So he began this full court press to create this fiction of what he actually owned, that he owned it and his father didn't own it. And that fiction developed over a course of years, the next 3 years. He had Roy Cohn call me and lie to me, about what he was looking at. I didn't really, I knew who Roy Cohn was. And I said, can you send me those documents, Mr. Cohn? He was like, I can't do that. He wanted me to take his word for it. The most notorious fixer in American history, knowing as I did even then that he was a mob lawyer and the McCarthyite fixer who had that list of the suspected communists. That was his list that Donald Trump has $500 million in liquid assets, and he's looking at a bank statement. And it was like, gee, what does this remind me of? And then the year later, Donald Trump himself, his secretary, said, this year, you're not going to meet Donald, because I'd met him 2 years in a row for hours and hours.
That you sat down and spoke to him about his income.
Sat down, spoke to him. He created a show for me. The first time I met him, I got to tell you this story, because it seems to never make it into print, but it'll make it on your show, Egberto.
First time, there we go.
Here it goes. I'm sitting there. Well, first of all, Ivanka comes in holding a piece of marble. He wants to show off his trophy wife. It was like, to this 23-year-old reporter. Donald is 33 at the time. He had just turned 34. And he wants to show off his wife, and he says, isn't she great? As she's walking, he's like, I got a 10, right? And great taste. So he's showing, and she comes in, and she meets me, she sits on his lap, and she kisses him. It's like, so then she walks out. So I'm interviewing him for hours, and I show him this list. And the way I did the list is I ranked the different people based upon their fortunes on what I had known, and let them talk about each other and, and what they think is wrong, or who's got a lot of debt, or who's missing from the list. And I had it was the best list of New York real estate that had been done. No one had tried it before. And Donald saw like these people, and he and his father were like at the bottom of the list with a question mark. With other people, maybe 100 million, which was the cutoff.
Right.
He saw the list. His face dropped like he was shocked, and he was so upset because he wanted to be at the top of his list.
Right.
So right then he started a full court press with me and with Forbes to get to the top of the list. He said, I've got, your list is way up. I've got more than any of these people. And I was like, I knew a fair amount about it. I said, I know you're full of shit. It's like, how full of shit are you? So while I'm talking to him, his secretary comes in and he says, Mr. Trump, your father's on the phone. And I said, he said, okay, I'll take this. It'll just be a few minutes, he says to me. And I said, would you like me to go outside? Would you like me to step outside from this gigantic office he's in? He says, no, you sit there. So I sat there. I pretended to, I was looking at, but it was all a show. So he's talking in the phone, and he's talking about buying these treasury bills and notes. And he says, no, Dad, we got to buy the 20-year. Let's put 20 million into that. And I want to liquidate this fund. And what's being demonstrated is that he's the one in control of the family money. He's advising his father how to invest it. And so I'm sort of moving closer, looking at stuff on his desk, this giant desk. And I'm listening, and I'm like, there is no voice at the other end of that phone. and I move a little closer, and he notices that I notice, and he says, okay, Dad, I'm being interviewed by Forbes for the Forbes 400 right now. I'm going to hang up. And he hangs up, and he looks at me, and he says, that was my father. He asked me about these kind of things. I went to Wharton. And I really
Are you serious?
yeah. It never happened. I mean, there was no one on the other phone, and he never had those monies. I mean, as the New York, over the years, a lot of people have written about Donald Trump's wealth, and documents have come out about the estate after his father died. He didn't have any control of his father's money, and they've never been liquid. They've never invested in T-bills. All their money was in projects, and they took out of projects and in trust funds. So the whole thing was,
A charade.
a charade. So 2 years later, when instead of going to meet him, his secretary calls me and says, John, Donald's not going to talk to you for the Forbes 400 this year. John Barron, the VP of Finance, is going to talk to you. Now, because I was in my office and I had a tape recorder connected to the phone, I recorded the calls. And they are, and they followed it up again in August. And they are the only recordings in existence of Donald Trump pretending to be John Barron. There was one recording of him pretending to be John Miller that was 11 minutes long, about him bragging about how great a husband he was, or how great a boyfriend, and how much he wants to sleep with him. That tape did not have, it was not given by the journalist who had done it. It was secondhand, and he denied it. This tape he couldn't deny. I mean, when I found the tape like 35 years later, and I went back for this Washington Post series, and I went back and I looked up, what had happened since then, and I realized how deliberate the con was, and how he had played me, and where the lies were. Because all those years, what I did was, it was like Donald Trump says he's worth $700 million, and we say
and you wrote it down.
No, I didn't write it down. I mean, I went through all this stuff, and I was like, I'm doing a good job. All these years, I thought I did a really good job, because he said he was worth $500 million. We said $100 million. He said he was worth the next year $600 million. We said he and his father were worth $200 million. And he would write letters to the editor of Forbes. The first year, he called my editor and he said, "Who is this kid you're sending down? He's an idiot. Send someone who knows what he's doing to interview me." And of course, my editor went down and he said, "Jonathan's got all these numbers and his estimates are good. He's right, and we're not going to change anything." So then he writes to Malcolm Forbes and he says, "Your staff doesn't know what it's doing. I'm worth much more." Every year he'd send these letters to Forbes, arguing, because the number that Forbes had was much more. So that's how Donald Trump cons. He moves the guidepost.
So let me stop you a second to let our audience know. So at that point you were working for Forbes magazine, and you were putting these pieces together every year with all the billionaires in the area.
At first, it was centimillionaires. Over 100 million was the cutoff. The cutoff is now 2 billion.
Okay, got it.
But I was doing the assessments, especially the private wealth. I mean, this is really easy when you have stock and everyone sees how much there is. Real estate is very complicated. It was my expertise through the 1980s. You really have to think of how many mortgages. You sort of measure the differential between the value when they bought it and the value now. That's a good way to do it. But we thought, it turns out, as I found out 35 years later, that Donald Trump was trying to get a casino license and had gone into the New Jersey Gaming Commission, and he had given his real assets because he had to sign a legal statement and said, "This is what I have." And those real assets were worth under $5 million. And he was worth $100 million. And had I known that in Jersey City, in some file cabinet, at that moment, there was a document which I might have been able to get had I driven there and found it and known about it, that showed that the estimates that that he was already playing me. My job was to see, I thought, to make sure that he did not get put down for $500 million, like people who are actually worth $500 million, but only $100 million. In fact, and that's how Trump plays it. Only 100 million was already bullshit because he was worth less than 10 million. He should never have been on the list, and neither should his father at that time, because he told them they had 25,000 apartments and they only had like not 8,000.
That is amazing. So, so let me ask you this: when it occurred, I mean, when this story broke, because like I told you, I just happened to be watching the TV and MSNBC broke the story saying, "Oh, there's a Washington Post article by a Jonathan Greenberg," and then the stuff hit the fan, and every single network then picked up your story on having those tapes, and those tapes were played all over the world.
Yeah, and the Daily Show, Trevor Noah called it the origin lie upon which Trump built his bullshit career.
Right.
Such a great job on it. He called it lie maintenance. And then in the behind the scenes, Trevor Noah was talking to this other commentator, turned to the audience and said, he held up the Forbes. He said, "This is the new definition of white privilege."
Exactly.
Said, a white man Donald Trump went into the bank with this Forbes article and he said, "Lend me $300 million to build this building in Atlantic City." He said, if a dark-skinned person went into a bank and say, "Here I am in Jet Magazine and, I'm paid $100 million," they would have said, "Are you crazy? Get out of here."
Oh, well, I can tell you a story. I went for $40,000 and they asked me, "Did you have $40,000 to back it in assets?" And I said, "No, but I had excellent credit." The guy laughed me out of the bank.
Yeah.
That's the name of the game. But anyhow, but let me ask you, so what do you think he's really worth, Jonathan, based on all your experience with going through his numbers?
Well, back then he was worth, he has inherited from his father that real estate has appreciated. He did go bankrupt. He was worth, in 1991, when, months after he was writing letters to Forbes complaining and insisting that he was worth $1.5 billion, he was actually worth negative $200 million. He had sunk that low.
So let me ask you something. How can somebody who's worth and this is what I have always said is wrong with the type of economy that we have. If he's worth negative $200 million, how does he recover from that, not having any assets in his name and having proven that he has the ability to lose $200 million? How do you get a second chance?
That's a really good question. And that is reinventing himself. So by 1991, he had taken $3 billion in loans for Atlantic City and real estate and the overpaid plaza. And he's like, I'm not allowed to curse, am I? No.
No, you can't use the F word.
Because Donald Trump does a lot, by the way.
Yes, I know.
He does it a lot. But so I'll try not to use that word. But he goes into the lenders and, who he owes $3 billion. He says, "Listen, there's two ways this can happen. It could be worth absolutely zero, or if you want to get $200 million out of this, you play ball with me and let me turn this around. Let me at least get, I'll get you $200 million, or you take a $3 billion haircut." And they're like, "We thought you," and he said, "Look, this is," so they put him on an allowance of only $300,000 a month. He had to sell his private jet and his yacht and the Plaza Hotel and all these assets that he sold. And that was his allowance. He got literally an allowance. And then he borrowed from his father. And then he figured out that if here's the thing to understand about Trump and the Russian money laundering and the oligarchs. Donald Trump's reputation in New York City as of 1990-91 was mud. Not a single legitimate business person would ever lend him money or be his partner or go into business with him. As I said in the Trump's 6 essential cons, to be a winner every time, Donald Trump makes losers out of everyone who he does business with.
Actually, you know what I'd like you to do? Do you have the article in front of you?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd like you, let's go ahead and explain those 6 cons that you talked about in that article. Enumerate them for the audience.
Con number one, to borrow billions, Trump lies to inflate his net worth, which we're talking about. Con number two, to avoid taxes, Trump lies to deflate his net worth. By the way, he's still doing everything that's on here. He still is saying that his golf courses, he values them at $15 million, but when he goes to pay taxes on them, his attorney says it's only worth $1.4 million. I mean, this is happening today, my friend.
As the president of the United States.
The president of the United States. He has lawyers suing the real estate for lower real estate assessments everywhere he has. So on one hand, he says it's worth $50 million. When he goes to pay taxes, he says, you've assessed me at $5 million. It's only worth $1.4 million, and here's why. And he ties them up in court, and then they settle. So con number three, to be a winner, Trump makes losers of those he does business with. And then I say, to make every business deal with him sound sweeter than it was, Trump marketed his name as synonymous with gold-plated luxury. But few of his deals had happy endings. His narcissistic need to be a winner every time meant that there were losers every time. This meant just about anyone who made the mistake of signing a contract to lend or partner or supply goods or services after stifling his partners, So that's another one. Con number four, to win in politics, Trump makes voters believe that his presidency benefits them. And that goes to something that you've talked about and that we've talked about together years ago, which is the big con of the grand oligarch party, the Republicans, is this idea of getting, working class people to vote against their economic self-interest. And Trump does it, with the traditional ways of, playing the fear card, the white male grievance card, the scapegoating card of it's these people taking your money. It's because of these Central Americans coming in and these immigrants.
And when he was benefiting from just about everything that none of us actually could. Now, let me ask you, did you get, before we go back into that article with the different cons that he's doing, what kind of pushback did you get? Did you get the White House contacting you or anything like that to try to shut you up or get those tapes? Or are you worried about them monitoring you now or what?
Well, I got to tell you, the editor of the Washington Post is Marty Baron, the guy who made the Spotlight movie about.
Right.
Is really one of the greatest, is the greatest editor I've ever experienced in my life. Whatever else you can say about Jeff Bezos, there is a wall between the editorial, and the publishing. He's given them money to go out after this, and they had an amazing editorial team and lawyers, and they said, before we go, you've got to take this to the White House, and and you've got to put it in front of them and give them a chance for comment. And then I got a call, and I said, you got 6 p.m. till 6 p.m. Eastern time. I get this phone call from the deputy press secretary of Trump's press secretary, the White House, and he said, the president is on the golf course right now with Sarah. We've got the tapes. Before we can make a comment, we need to play them for him, and he hasn't had a chance to listen to them. So we'd like you to extend the deadline till 8 p.m. because the Washington Post was coming at it like midnight that night online. Mm-hmm. And I said, so I got permission. I said, okay. The call, and then my editor who was working with me said, they're not going to comment because they know it's legitimate. True. In truth, he never called me back because unlike the other tape, I had there's something called a chain of custody with Don.
Right.
And I had physically the tapes with the name on it, John Barron. And it had never been out of my possession. And the fact is, unlike the other thing, which supposedly he received the call and Donald Trump as John Miller talking about Madonna wanting to date him and what a great partner he was for Marla Maples, unlike that tape where somebody called in the reporter, he said, look, anyone could call in pretending to be me. And, what do you say to that? In this case, his secretary arranged an appointment with Forbes, 2 appointments at a specified time, and I received a call from John Barron at that time. There was and he knew that. Now, here's the amazing thing. Rush Limbaugh also mentioned this story to see how it was played.
No kidding, huh?
Yeah, he did. He insulted me, of course. He said, "How could this guy be?" Anyway, he said, "How can this guy be still alive today if it was, well, anyway, 25 years ago, 35 years ago." But he said that, and maybe Trump did do it, and sort of, it just shows that Forbes was duped and that Trump is a really persuasive guy. It was like good for him for getting away with it.
Right.
And I think that Trump feels that way too.
That he got away with it. Oh, he got over Forbes, and now he's president of the United States.
Yeah. And you were asking about how he got money after the bankruptcies. He actually went public with casino companies. And while investors saw their stock between 2000 and 1995 in Trump casinos in 2008, while they saw the stock go from $35 to 17 cents a share,
wow,
Donald Trump made during those years in compensation $83 million.
How did he do that? That's how much he paid himself, or did he short the stock?
My friend, he's the CEO and he's Donald Trump. So, I mean, when I say he made losers of everyone he did business with, that's not. So by the end of all this, there's no way this guy's going to take a company public. The Apprentice was the greatest thing to ever happen to him. It was made completely on bullshit, and the Russian oligarch and mob money and Putin's money floated his properties, and the only bank to lend to him is Deutsche Bank, which is under investigation for over $20 billion of money laundering with not just drug cartels, but mostly, Russian oligarchs. Yeah. So that's why he is beholden to the Russians. I mean, because, he is reliant upon them. They're the only ones who will lend money to him.
Okay, so you know for a fact then that he is getting money from the Russians for all his endeavors.
Well, the great journalist Craig Unger wrote House of Trump, House of Putin, and he really traces the money that came in from them. He's getting money for, is it just money laundering and he wants to allow oligarchs to spend their, money on his overpriced properties? Or is there a quid pro quo where he, where do you prove the quid pro quo that this is why he is coddling Russia and wants to, help them in this way and that way, and why he believes Putin and not the intelligence agencies of the United States? It's that the quid pro quo is hard to prove. The investment of Russian oligarchs, and that's where we're hoping many journalists and voters are hoping that the tax returns, show his reliance upon those types of loans. And that's where the Deutsche Bank thing gets really interesting, Marky, because who was head of Deutsche Bank United States who gave those loans.
What is his name again? He was in the administration.
No, it's
the previous administration
of the Supreme Court Justice Kennedy.
Oh, wait, say that again?
Kennedy, the Supreme Court Justice who mysteriously resigned.
Right.
Here. It's his son.
I didn't know that. I know that okay, wow.
So he is implicated in greenlighting all the money to Trump, that the money laundering operations from the funds of the private wealth funds, the offshore private wealth funds that Deutsche Bank specialized in on behalf of Russian oligarchs.
Jonathan,
Putin himself.
Let's see if you're making a little bit of news that could be used conspiratorially. Are you saying maybe Kennedy's stepping down could have been an order from the president in order to? Is that a possibility?
Yes.
Is that what you're implying?
Oh, yeah. Kennedy stepping down is seen as, and it has to do with executive branch power. I mean, what Kavanaugh is the quintessential political fixer.
Yes, yeah.
And there's likely to be a split vote about the use of executive power when it comes to subpoenaing Trump and possibly indicting him.
So I guess Roberts is our only savior right now, huh?
He is. surprisingly.
Roberts is the only savior America has right now.
What do you expect from Kavanaugh?
Wow. And the good thing about it is, in as much as Roberts is a right-wing guy, I honestly think he cares about the country a bit more.
I hope so, but you don't. This one you don't really know. These people pride themselves with what they call loyalty, and it's
Right.
loyalty to party, loyalty to the megalomaniac who controls this, and loyalty to the Constitution and the laws. I mean, these Supreme Court justices are political fixers in black robes.
Oh,
that
boy.
that four-person majority, maybe five.
All right, before we go to your book and give you a chance to plug your book as well, let me go and ask you, where do we go from here? I ask a lot of my the journalists that come on board, where are we going?
Okay, well, just quickly, I'm going to do the other two cons.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, yeah.
Avoid accountability. Trump makes the media and truth the enemy of the people. And 6, to stoke fear, Trump recasts perpetrators as victims. So I just wanted to say this is his MO. This is how he succeeds. And this is the pathology that his followers, that allow his followers to be incited to him, especially the last 3. This idea that, the victim card. So where do we go from here? Wait, that's your question?
Yeah, where do we go from here? In other words, you know Trump better than most of us. You actually sat next to him. You actually saw his antics. And I think you've done a lot of research on him. So where do you think we're sitting? And, first of all, do you think the outcome is that there's anything negative out of the Mueller report? My hunch is that it's going to be a meh when the report comes out. I'm curious.
I think I think it's going to show, a lot of financial interdependence, and the idea of continuing with the Moscow Trump hotel talks well into past the campaign, well into his presidency. The idea of covering those up. I think his tax returns are very, very important. The false statements he made to insurance companies in New York State are very important. I do believe that Letitia Jones, who I met when she was a council member back when I worked in the city council in 2002, I think she's going to end up really, really digging both him and Kushner and the statements they've made. I mean, he's gotten away with so much for so many years. The overall charge of collusion and proving that quid pro quo is going to be very difficult. But I think the reason and Jerry Nadler, who's bringing in,
he's working hard at it. Yeah.
Bring up the tax returns. They're going to investigate, and they should. That's their job. And the improprieties and using his office to enrich themselves. I think the impeachment. Obviously, the Senate's never going to vote to remove 2/3 of the Senate, but 19 Republican senators to vote to remove. But I think impeachment would be helpful in letting people understand the scandals and providing documentation and witnesses as to what a con man he is. And then, this Congress, the House could vote to impeach and the Senate could vote not to remove. But in the meantime, the headlines we've really got to take the headline power that he has, which the media, as you know, how much time did CNN give him in the campaign, and how much time did he give Bernie
$2 billion worth? Yes.
Right, and what did he give? They give Bernie Sanders in the media. I mean, that was a sham. Because he gets people's attention. He gets people's attention both on the right and the left by inciting people. We've got to take that capacity to dominate the headlines away from Donald Trump and give it to the House investigators, so that what's there about Trump is Trump's scandals, not Trump's scandalous policies against immigrants or which
Jonathan,
today.
What that means is we have some power to do that. Not as much as the big guns, but we can get it out piecemeal. And if I'm doing it, if you're doing it, and a couple more hundred or a couple more thousand of us are doing it out there, we can have our impact where it matters as well. So, I mean, we have to just keep the faith and do what we do. Now, we are coming to the end of this segment, but beforehand, I'd like for you to tell us, you decided to, you're an investigative journalist, but now you're an author of a novel. Tell me a little bit about that.
America 2034, Utopia Rising. It takes place in Trump's fifth term as president for life. He's the world's first trillionaire. The country is a Putin-style kleptocracy. The Constitution has been rewritten, and he is Big Brother. And 2/3 of America are in slave labor camps. Millions have died. They're selling their body parts to survive and feed themselves. It is the darkest dystopia. And behind a force field in the Western coast is the most harmonious utopia in existence, and they are expanding to transform Trump's dark America. That's the premise of the book. It starts with Trump stealing the 2020 election, and that's what I want to focus on, by creating a false flag operation and declaring a state of emergency the day before the election with a staged bomb attacks on polling places, which he blames on Antifa, and he calls a state of emergency and suspends all internet broadcasts, all communications except official White House communications, and he rounds up political dissidents and voters, and he calls out the National Guard and these Blackwater-style private contractors to every polling place where they snip the hair of people going in to vote, and if they find marijuana residue, which stays for 3 months, in the hair, they immediately call it a federal felony because it's still
Right.
And takes them off to concentration camps and disenfranchises them never to vote again. 25 million voters don't get to vote, and Trump wins in a landslide in a 2/3 majority in the Senate and House, and then rewrites the Constitution. The concept that Trump would declare a state of emergency for his, a wall with no need, with no rationale, built upon lies, just to win that point. What would Trump do to stay in power and stay out of jail in 2020? And that's the premise of the book, and it's in the first chapter of what he does do to create a dystopia. And that's what I want to say about the book is we need to be very careful, and this will test the power of every one of our institutions to stop Trump in 2020 from stealing this election. And that is why Michael Cohen testified to Congress. Now, Michael Cohen talks about people coming out if he loses the election. And I'm like, I'm the guy who knows about Trump's cons. He doesn't ask for forgiveness after the fact. He doesn't ask for permission. He's not going to chance it that they'll put him back in after the election. My concern, and the reason I've written this book is a cautionary tale, and one thing I want to stress about the book in America 2034 on your show is that I believe he is going to steal this election before the first vote is counted.
Wow. Jonathan, give us the name of the book again.
America 2034, Utopia Rising.
And where can they find it?
It's Amazon paperback, great audiobook with a great Trump impersonator, and on Kindle as well. And we have a website, america2034.com.
Please, Jonathan Greenberg, it was a pleasure seeing you again. Maybe we'll meet in Philadelphia later on this year. You have a wonderful day, and we'll talk again. Now go enjoy the rest of the day with that great weather you're having out there in California.
Thank you. I'm going to make some music.
Make some music.
Great show. Appreciate
Take care, buddy. Have a great day. Thank you so kindly. All right, folks, that was Jonathan Greenberg on the line. We go back a long time in several different activities. He's a great journalist. He's written for the Washington Post, Huffington Post, and several other places. But today I have a topic, an extended topic that I want to talk about, and it was triggered today by something that I heard Eddie Glaude say on TV today. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead and play that for you, and then we'll pick it up on the other side. So check this out.
I think Stacey Abrams' model is the model that we should be following. We should be planning to expand the electorate. I think Sherrod Brown has offered a pathway to talk about the dignity of work that will speak across racial, ethnic divides in this country. It's very clear to me, Katie, is that centrists in the party will say to progressives, you have to support a centrist if a centrist wins, because the objective is to get Donald Trump out of the office. The question, and it's an ironic question, will Democratic centrists support a progressive because they're committed to getting Donald Trump out of office? And it seems to me in the current debates that centrists and the corporate Democrats are too uneasy about really throwing their weight behind a progressive if a progressive actually wins the nomination.
Yeah, if it's an Elizabeth Warren or a Bernie Sanders, what does that centrist do, that potentially moneyed centrist? Do they go for a Warren or a Sanders candidate, or do they bite the bullet if they don't like Donald Trump and go back for Donald Trump? That is a good question.
I hope you guys got that. The idea, what Eddie Glaude was trying to say is that, hey, there's a darn good chance that this year the Democratic Party elects a progressive, a real progressive, to represent the Democratic Party in the election. And the question he's asking is whether corporate and establishment Democrats, and we know, some people get mad whenever we use those terms, but the question is whether corporate and establishment Democrats will support the nominee. Everybody always say, well, when a centrist gets elected as the nominee, we ask that the people on the left, we ask that progressives support the party. Go ahead and support the party. Go ahead and support the party. That's what they ask. And the truth of the matter is that's what's always done most of the times. But Eddie is asking a very important question. Dr. Eddie Glaude is asking a very important question. Will centrists support a progressive who wins, or will they go and either stay home or vote for Donald Trump? My theory is that no, they're not staying home. My theory is that they are going to come, and many of them will vote for Donald Trump. And why do I say that? I've written several articles before that show the similarity between what I call the elite and the upcoming elite. And it doesn't matter if they are centrist Democrats or they are centrist Republicans. They all share the same interests in monetarily. And the question is whether they are as altruistic as they claim to be in the support of policies that help middle-class America or that help the poor Americans. It is interesting because the other day I was working out with a person, and we started talking about taxing wealth, taxing these other issues. So we started talking, and I said, he said, oh, we need to have Medicare for all, and he was in support for a lot of these things that, he was more left than centrist as well in his support for these particular policies. But when I said, but we should also tax wealth, he said, oh, I don't know about that. So I asked him, do you have a home? Yes, I do. And I said, most American, or a large percentage of Americans have homes, right? Yes, they do. They're all paying a wealth tax on it, right? Yeah, I guess they're paying property taxes. Yeah, that's a wealth tax. Okay, if these people are paying a wealth tax, why is it that those people who own $160 billion worth of stocks, or $2 billion worth of stock, or $180 million or whatever, why aren't they paying a wealth tax just like every single American who owns a home, owns a car? They are paying wealth taxes because their wealth is invested in that house, in that car, or in some other asset. Why should we treat stocks as any different type of asset than we treat a home or anything else? And then he started to think, and then you could see that he didn't want to continue the conversation, so we didn't continue the conversation. But that is what Eddie Glaude said. There is a very poignant point that we are going to have to start bringing up within the Democratic Party. And the reason it has to be brought into the Democratic Party is we need to lay the cards down now. We need to lay the cards down now and ask, if it is that Bernie Sanders become the nominee for the party, how many Democrats are really going to support Bernie Sanders. People wonder, well, who will be Bernie Sanders' base if he gets elected? If an Elizabeth Warren gets elected, who will her base be? Will her base include the centrist Democrats? I wonder. Based on how I see many centrists talk about the left, I wonder. And that is one of the reasons why I'm telling a whole lot of progressive people in the pattern that we ought to have right now is not talking about anything other than telling stories and speaking directly to people's wants and needs so that we can build a base of progressive people. Not necessarily party base, but a base of progressive people that vote their interests. And if their interest happens to be the Democratic Party, do so. If the Democratic Party starts to go haywire on the right or whatever, we do what has to be done. And that is what we have to do. Okay, we are 45 minutes into the show, and I haven't had an ask yet. So let me ask you folks, those of you who are watching the show, I'd like to ask you to become subscribers of Politics Done Right. To become a subscriber of Politics Done Right, please go to patreon.com/Politics Done Right. Again, that is patreon.com/Politics Done Right. If you become a subscriber, you get access to, and by the way, subscriptions are very inexpensive, $1.99 or and whatever you want, or whatever you want to do and above. What we give you as a token, anybody who subscribes gets How to Make America Utopia. How to Make America Utopia, that's a book that I'm writing right now. And the way it goes is as follows. Every chapter that I write goes online, and as soon as it's released, you get a chance to see it. Chapter 1, Chapter 2, those are already written. I'm working on Chapter 3. Actually, I've been off of working on it for about a week, but I'll be back on working on it this weekend. And when that chapter comes out, there's another chapter for you to read. But there's no despair, because you know what? There's another book out there. As I See It, Class Warfare, the Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom. Before I brought Jonathan on the phone, we were talking about things that Monsanto and these other companies are doing with seeds, and I'm going to talk about that later on. Because when he touched me about that, I said, you know what, my audience, I've told them that before, but I need to bring that up again at a time for them to see it. But anyway, this book is completely written. It's been written. It's now also online. So anybody who subscribed to the show gets a chance to get this book and read this book online, the entire book online. So please consider going to patreon.com/Politics Done Right. Again, that is patreon.com/Politics Done Right. As well, my dear friends, activists can have weight problems as well, right? And guess who had one of those? And because of health concerns and health reasons, when my blood pressure got up to 240 over 140, and yes, that's 240 over 140, I really took a turn in the way I did things and the way I ate, the way I exercised so far. And what I did is I wrote this book, Lose Weight and Be Fit Now. Say no to snake oil weight loss. And I tell you, if you want an inspiring book, what I think is inspiring based on me doing it my way, you doing it your way, I think that is the best way if you really want to take some pounds off, you really want to lose weight, and you also want to not only lose weight, but you want to keep it off, and you want to get healthier. Hey, check that out, because I tell you, that is what I did, and guess what? It worked. It worked, and it continues to work. So please consider getting subscribe to patreon.com. patreon.com/Politics Done Right. Your subscription gives you access to all of the books that I write, plus the ones that are currently written, the ones that I'm writing, and the subsequent ones that I'm writing. And the My Books section of my website, you get all of that. Now, we have, if you're interested in having a Politics Done Right bumper sticker, just drop me a line. I'll send you a Politics Done Right bumper sticker. Subscribe. I'll send you a bumper sticker if you give us your address to send the bumper sticker. We are going to get some cups and some other things for the show in subsequent weeks, so that we have other things to sort of entice you to become a part of the family. You know, what we do is very important. Yesterday, I interviewed the ambassador of Colombia. He was formerly the vice president of Colombia. He's now the ambassador of Colombia to the United States. This is a guy who was kidnapped by the drug lord. I forgot his name right now. But anyhow, we do all those kinds of things. There are times that I fly to Washington if there's going to be a good interview or a good conference that we need to attend to do what's necessary for the progressive movement. I mean, all of this costs, and what I ask you to do is please become a subscriber to Politics Done Right. That is how we can stay alive. I was talking to Jonathan before, and Jonathan said, Egberto, we are all of us, writers and progressive activists and all these other folks, we are in the gig economy, man, because we have to try to scrunch from all these different places, these different revenue sources to try to survive. You can help by being a subscriber, because you know what? It's not we're giving substance and we're making sure things happen, because when we inform, whether people are subscribing or not, when we inform, we ensure that people start voting their interest. And in voting their interest, they're voting your interest. And in voting your interest, it means things get better for you. Invest in making sure things get better for you. So I trust that you will consider becoming a subscriber to Politics Done Right. Again, if you just want to give a contribution to Politics Done Right, you can also just go to politicsdoneright.com and click on the donate button and subscribe that way. Anyhow, folks, I was just mentioning about the seeds because Jonathan was just telling, before we got on air, he was just talking about that. And some of the things that we speak about in that book, As I See It, Class Warfare, The Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom, very few people really understand how entrenched the corporation is to controlling just about every aspect of our life. And I want to give you one insidious thing. And this one is one of the most terrible things I think one could do. Corporations, of course, are in the agribusiness as well. And they make seeds. They have all these genetically modified seeds that they claim are better, they grow faster. But they also do something else with a lot of these seeds. They actually put what I call a time bomb in these seeds. And what that means is you go ahead and you plant a kernel of corn, right? Some of them, I don't know if it's the corn, but there are several different seeds that they allow to grow once. In other words, you plant it, and when you get your crop, the crop that you get is not plantable. So they put a time stop on that seed from reproducing. They are messing with our food supply. So think about this. Suppose somehow all our naturally growing corn and soybeans and all these guys all get pollinated by these other seeds out there that have that clock on. Slowly, all the seeds that we have become the ownership of some corporation. And not only does it become the ownership of the corporation, but it is set to turn off. So that if you don't buy the seeds that don't turn, that's reprogrammed from the corporation, there's no more food. So this is a corporate control of the food supply. I remember watching a movie, I think it was The Omen. I think it was like the second or third version of The Omen. And that was one of the issues, the control of the food supply by Damien, if I remembered correctly. In other words, Damien was the devil or the representative of the devil. And that was a magical thing they were talking about, controlling the food supply. And right now, as it is today, that is where we're heading, with seeds that grow once, or seeds that are genetically modified to only grow once. Now think about that. Is that really the world we should be living in? Should we even allow that to occur? I mean, should we allow something to occur that can spread throughout the world, create famines, and then only X corporation could solve the problem in making sure that, we'll reinterpret the seed and allow the seed to now start growing? Folks, people just don't understand the danger, the corporate danger in this country when we make the laws that we have that protect corporations with silence, that protect corporations' secrecy, even though a corporation is a public entity. But somehow it has the secrecy laws of people. It can give more money to politicians than people. Folks, unless we get the right Congress, and I don't mean just any Democrat unless we get a Congress with moral progressives who understand that right now we are in a fight, and the fight is not one that is easily seen. And you know, I mean, a lot of people think that whenever we talk these issues, that we're overblowing these issues. There is a fight between the corporate structure and the citizens themselves. It is a fight that says, I hope you guys would take a look at one of the videos that I made that talks about whatever the market would bear and pricing power. What we have is in a corporate structure, it's in such a manner that they control every aspect of your life. And you as a consumer and not the owner of the sources of production means that that person who owns the sources of production, that person who owns you, they are not only your masters, they decide what you make, they decide what you earn, and every single year as we continue to move forward and forward, you lose more and more control. And what you get is the semblance of making money. Oh, they pay a group of people within that corporation X amount of dollars, right? A lot of them to keep them as the guardians to the gate. They're the ones you're going to see on TV. Oh, we shouldn't be doing that to Ford. Oh, we shouldn't be doing that to Monsanto. Oh, we shouldn't be doing that to these other corporations. Because they're good. And look at how much they donate to charity. And look at how much good giving they give. Look at how altruistic they are. None of them are. Ultimately, they do the things to stay in existence and to stay in the good grace to prevent you from getting your politicians to control what they can't do. But what they are doing today is slowly, and this all started with restarted with the Paul Manifesto. The idea is to have complete control of our economy. That's why you always hear Republicans and centrist Democrats talking about the private sector, not lying to you and telling you that somehow the private sector is always more efficient. How can profit be efficient in healthcare? Profit in healthcare, profit in paying a bill means it costs more because you have to pay the owners of the corporations for simply paying a bill. In the drug companies, the taxpayers take the risk to start all these studies to try to give the viability of these medicines. But still, in as much as we pay the tax dollars to start the real risk portion of drug development, most of the risk in drug development is not taken up by the corporations. If that were the case, they wouldn't be making that much money. Their profit margin wouldn't be that large. If that were the case, they wouldn't be spending more money on marketing than on research and development. But they are. We have to remember now, folks, that the corporation is good at taking control in a hidden fashion, in a covert fashion, and that's by design. We have to understand that, and we cannot believe or follow those who constantly want us to move everything to the private sector, those who want the private sector to reign, those who want charter schools, those who want private. I mean, we have to get out of that. Those mechanisms, that mechanism is a mechanism to drag and draw your power, take control away from you. Only the people that have price and power can build wealth and can survive. If you want to know why insulin, I did this on insulin. If you want to know why insulin, which hasn't changed in 100 years, went from $21 a vial to $300 a vial, more than a 1,700% increase, it's because they can do it. And when they decide that their shareholders want more money, and when they decide that the executive want more money, it's irrespective of what the product costs to make. It is whatever the market will bear. And they will say, we will go ahead and extract as much money as we can for something that you need because those shareholders, those millionaires and those billionaires want more money. So even though the product hasn't changed in price, we're going to price it up. That's a transfer of wealth from the middle classes, the poor, the people who don't have pricing power, to the corporate state, or not to the corporate states, but to the owners of the corporation and the executives. I wish I had a magic wand that could freeze that into people's brains so that they can see the danger, that they could see the danger of that setup. That setup is so dangerous, it is existential to your well-being. It is existential to your freedom. It is existential to decide if you ever would be able to build anything of value for you and your family. This is not left-wing stuff. This is reality. We have to start thinking about what happens for those who don't have pricing power, for those who are not in control of the corporations. They control everything and you haven't got a chance. The only chance you have is to elect the right people who are going to rein in the power back from these guys who have abused it. Please go to patreon.com, patreon.com/politicsdoneright. Again, that is patreon.com/politicsdoneright. Please become a subscriber. We need tons of subscribers and we are lagging very far behind. Your support, your subscriptions is, for Politics Done Right, existential. Thank you so kindly. My name is Egberto Willies, and you know how I end this baby. I am what? Out!
Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right.
1, 2, 3, 4.